All right. Welcome, everyone, to Good Medicine Way, August 1st. A little bit of a interesting evening tonight because a lot of people are still en route from the Wachoni family camp that took place this weekend up in Oregon. So they might jump on at some point, but a lot of people are in the middle of traveling right now. We're coming to you from Tablelands and now so-called Albuquerque, New Mexico. And we greet you all tonight. And we're going to start off tonight with a four-direction prayer. When Casey's here, he usually adds the four directions, then he'll do the sky, the earth, and yourself. But this is just, we're going to use an old four-directional prayer that's attributed to Chief Seattle. I've heard from others that there is some controversy as to where it actually came from, but it's most often attributed to Chief Seattle. So we'll be doing praying towards the four directions. Leah's got some sacred herbs here, some tobacco, sage, and sweetgrass and cedar that we'll be using for each of the directions as we send our prayers up to Creator. And I'll go ahead and share the screen that has the words on it so that you guys can all see the words I'm using. I think it's that screen. Yes. Okay. So, Great Spirit of Light, come to me out of the east with the power of the rising sun. Let there be light in my words. Let there be light on my path that I walk. Let me remember always that you give the gift of a new day, and never let me be burdened with sorrow by not starting over again. Then turn to the south. Great Spirit of creation, send me the warmth and soothing winds from the south. Comfort me and caress me when I am tired and cold. Unfold me like the gentle breezes that unfold the leaves on the trees. As you give to all the earth your warm, moving wind, give to me so that I may grow close to you in warmth. Turning to the west. Great life-giving Spirit, I face the west, the direction of sundown. Let me remember every day that the moment will come when my sun will go down. Never let me forget that I must fade into you. Give me a beautiful color. Give me a great sky for setting, so that when it is my time to meet you, I can come with glory. Now turn to the north. Great Spirit of love, come to me with the power of the north. Make me courageous when the cold wind falls upon me. Give me strength and endurance for everything that is harsh, everything that hurts, everything that makes me squint. Let me move through life ready to take what comes from the north. Man did not create the web of life. He is but a strand in it. Whatever man does to the web, he does to himself. Amen. All right. So next, we also had a conference down here in Tablelands. That was let me let you guys explain it. And then you can pass it on.
While the Wachoni camp was going on in Oregon, here in Albuquerque, a conference was going on by the Mythopoeic Society called MythCon, and they different authors, professors, and fans of C.S. Lewis, Charles Williams, J.R. Tolkien have been for over 50 years having these conferences. And at night they have bardic circles, which are like native story circles, song story circles. And so my good friend here, Melody Green, she is the Dean of Urbana Theological Seminary in Urbana, Illinois, and I've asked her to speak a little bit about some stuff from MythCon land.
Thank you, Leah. Okay. So it actually, how this came together was I was talking to Leah about, I'm teaching a class on the author G.K. Chesterton this fall, and I mentioned to her that I've started reading this fascinating book called The Everlasting People, G.K. Chesterton and the First Nations. And Leah immediately said, well, I know the person who wrote the foreword, K.C. Church. So she asked me to tell you just a little bit about some of what I'm getting out of this book and finding fascinating. If you can see here, I'm not done. That's where I'm about halfway through, give or take a little bit. But some of the things that have really stood out to me is this is a conversation that needs to continue. This book is just opening the door about one particular author that we don't normally think of in relation to the First Nations. He's a British guy. He died in 1936. But there are some things that he has in common and some things that he has said that are worth thinking about and exploring further. And like one thing that stood out to me is this author, Matthew Milliner, points out that G.K. Chesterton believed very strongly in the importance of where you're from, your home, your land, your place. And he even has more than one fiction story about a person who is very much in love with where they're from and what happens if that has been challenged or taken away from them. Or the Napoleon of Notting Hill is one of those, that someone is going to take this person's land away from him and what he does. So that's one thing that was worth talking about and continuing the conversation about G.K. Chesterton and the First Nations. Some of the other things that stood out is Chesterton has a book called The Everlasting Man, where he argues that what makes people human is art, our ability to create art. And he talks about the cave paintings that were discovered, and Matthew Milliner connects those with Native American art and talking about how that makes us unique and who we are. Another part, the part that I just got to, he's talking about how academics, we often want to explain. We hear a Native American story, we want to explain, this is what it means, this is where it came from. And Chesterton says, if you're doing that, you're getting it wrong. That what you need to do is listen. That those of us who don't know those stories, we have to sit back, listen, and let them be a mystery. So, like I said, I'm only halfway through the book. This guy named K.C. Church, that I understand you guys know, wrote the foreword, and hopefully you will be able to have other conversations about this in the future. And thank you for letting me talk about it.
Yes, definitely on my to-read list.
Sister, can I tell you, thank you for that. I read G.K. Chesterton years ago. Was he from Georgia? But I had no idea that that he had written in this book, so I'm excited to hear about this. And can you tell me, it's just called G.K. Chesterton and the First Nations?
I'm sorry, it's The Everlasting People, G.K. Chesterton and the First Nations.
Thank you, honey. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, he was from England, late 1800s, early 1900s. But,
Yeah. Very cool.
All right. And next up, Andrew Funk was at that gathering in Oregon, and he's going to tell us what happened up there. Take it away, Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. It's hard, sort of like what we just heard. Our ancestral stories are very much a mystery, and as First Nations people, we are very much tied to place, but that means that we're also tied to event. And so now I have to be abstracted from that and sort of put that back, and it's nearly impossible to talk about just all the beauty that happened. I wasn't there for the first 2 days. I had to work, and I'm really sad because there was so much that happened. So I joined for the powwow, and that was just incredible for me to be able to see that and to feel really connected, not just to other Native people, but back to my ancestors. One of my Cherokee elders, Randy Woodley, was there and danced. And it's beautiful for me to see any Native people dance. But whenever I meet other fellow Cherokees, especially someone like Randy that means so much to me, out there dancing. It just really brought me a lot of joy, and I felt so connected. And I was always ashamed to get back into my ways. My family sort of carried a lot of shame from some different painful stuff that happened past couple generations for being Cherokee, and I've also been ashamed for being so light skinned, and and so at the very end, the exits, she's not here, but Shondine was like, "Hey, come on out," and I'm like, "I can't do this. Like, I'm not worthy. I'm not legit. I really am, but I'm still working through a lot of that stuff." And she's like, "No." And honestly, I have known to never say no to a fellow Native woman. It just does not go well. It didn't work well with my Cherokee grandmother or my sister, who was a Cherokee as well. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna get out there. And yeah, it's hard to describe what I felt, but I felt home. I felt like I was transported back in the past, but still in the present, and I felt real. And so I made up my mind that next year, and I was talking to Shondine, and also to, if any of you all know Sade, who walked me through a process of going through reclaiming her Lenape identity. And she said something that really touched me, that said, our regalia reflects our spirit. And I said, well, I want to reflect my spirit next year. And so I was talking to both of them and showing them pictures of, some Eastern Cherokee regalia that that the people wear out there in their powwows and their dances. And I said, I want to start putting some of this together so I can wear this next year. And so, so yeah, that was really, really special. And then the next day, I don't know, do you have any of those pictures to share, Leah, or did I send them too late? I sent them to the email. Yeah, okay. So I got horribly sunburned, but anyways, that's my own fault. I just thought that this picture was so beautiful. You have multiple ethnicities represented in each of us, Christina, Namar, and I. And then you also have, in terms of indigeneity, you have Southeastern tribes represented here as well. And so I just thought it was really, really beautiful, is that, we represent the world and so many cultures, but yet we also represent the Southeast. And I was just so moved by how much all of us came together because we share that tribal nature. And the things that dominant culture easily seek to divide us, along race, along gender, along ethnicities, along class. And it takes all of about a minute to blow up on Facebook and everyone's fighting. And that just wasn't it here. We have this unity as tribal people. And because we're connected to these ancient places from these ancient ancestral lines, I just saw that it just has the power to destroy so quickly colonialism. And that means a lot to me because I've been struggling with that. And this says it here. And Jonathan and Barry, if you all know Jonathan and Barry, they're in the back. They both were really, really affirming. They're like, you know what, Andrew, I see you as Native. I don't see you as white. You need to hear that. You need to embrace that. Yeah. And I just made so many, I don't want to say friends because everyone just felt like family. And if you want to flip to the next picture, this was a song called Wake Up Sleeping Giants. And they were quoting Billy Graham. And one thing that I just couldn't stop thinking of is I recently read one of our Cherokee Bigfoot stories, and his name is called Sul Kalu. He's our giant. And many tribes, Lakota, Dakota, and also the Ojibwe, and I'm sure other tribes have Bigfoot legends. And ours is that Bigfoot is this extraordinary provider that will provide deer and firewood and come out of the mountains and literally move the impossible things for the Cherokee people. But if the Cherokee people do not follow what he asks, then he disappears and he will not show his face. And I just kept thinking of that as they were chanting and drumming, Wake Up Sleeping Giants. It's like, Barry taught me that our tribal ways run in line with the biblical ways, and we don't have to sacrifice that anymore. And so I see my people's legend of Sul Kalu as a type of Christ figure and as creator, that if we are willing to listen to what he's asking us to do, he will come out and provide amazing things. And I saw that, you know. So if you want to go to the next one, I'm trying very hard to keep it brief. And yeah, this was right after Jonathan shared that, I think when he was either 30 or probably 40, and I'm 40 now, he said, you know what, I've hated my light skin my whole life. I blame my mother. And that's actually ironic because it's my mother that brought that in. My father's very dark, and you know, looks pretty Cherokee, and he's like, you know what, I just God told me that a creator told me that I created you this way. And I'm sure he's created Jonathan light for many reasons, but one way he created him light was to help set me free. And this isn't about me, and I know he's got a beautiful ministry and so much more, but that sort of came together in my story. And yeah, and then next picture. Last but not least, Brian shared a couple weeks ago about the movie Rumble, The Indians Who Rock the World. I love it. I could watch it every week. The blues came from the Southeast. It came from African and Native American people. We know it came from the Tuscarora, the Choctaw, the Cherokee, and probably many more, and African American people, and it meshed together. And I have always been moved by the blues and bluegrass and gospel, and now I know that that is a creative fusion of my people from long ago. So and I can't remember. I know he's if anyone can remind me of his name, but the man playing there is Grand Rond, and he just went into this blues. Say again.
I'm sorry, I was just going to correct you. It's Klamath past tribal chairman Donnie Gentry.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, Klamath. Thank you, Donnie Gentry. So he just went into this blues riff, and it just like melted my soul and just moved. It reminded me of, you know, when when I would worship in church, and me and my Cherokee grandmother would be standing up and moving and dancing, and everyone else would just be sitting there dead. And always felt out of place, but I didn't feel out of place here. And you know, people were started whooping when they heard the riff, and it just I love that those rhythms from some of my people have blessed everyone here. And so and you know, that music that they call secular or profane, the blues, or I find it spiritual, and I think Creator has used that as he's used all of our ancestral ways. So I could say a lot more, but I obviously want to be respectful of the time. So yeah, I had an amazing experience, and I'm going to go for the whole time next time.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah, a lot of neat insights. Yeah, it was interesting with like even with the conference that was going on here. A lot of people were saying just being able to be together with people who get you is like such a great experience to have. So, yeah. And let's see, it looks like next up we're going to do a couple songs. So we're actually going to do 2 Jonathan Miracle songs tonight. So
3 really.
well, yeah, if you count at the end, we'll do the Ghana Ronco at the very end. But yeah, so we're going to open up with an older Jonathan Miracle song called the Honor Song, and then we're going to do a newer Jonathan Miracle song, We Are One. We're going to get those queued up, and you all can sing along at home. Yeah, please do sing and dance and stomp and drum and whatever Creator moves in your spirit. But just make sure you have your mic muted. Not because we don't think you sing and stomp and drum and dance well, but because the delays over the internet would make it a mess. We would all be like 2 or 3 seconds apart from each other. But yeah, but please do join in your own space there.
Thank you, brother and sister. That was beautiful worship.
Woo! Glad you were blessed. We were too.
Yes.
Right. We got some words from Creator's words here. This is 1 John 2:15-17. Do not love the ways of the world. Do not love the ways of this world, nor the things you can get from the world. When you love the world, it shows that the love of our Father, the Great Spirit, is not alive in you. For all the things found in the world, desiring to walk in broken ways, longing to have everything you see, thinking you're better and more deserving than others, these things are not from our Father, the Great Spirit, but from the world. This world is coming to an end, along with all its broken desires. But the ones who walk in the ways of the Great Spirit will remain to the time beyond the end of all days. These are Creator's words.
Introducing Chuck.
All right, did I skip over the announcements? Why, I did. Let me backtrack to the announcements and offerings. Now, as far as the offering, if you'd like to donate to the work of Good Medicine Way and replenish our supply of First Nations New Testaments, we've given out just about all of them. And what you do is you go to the Good Medicine Way Facebook page, and up there at the top is our logo that talks about PayPal. So you just click right there and can donate to Good Medicine Way there. And as far as announcements goes, the Women's Circle on Wednesday nights, which is virtual, is finishing up the Book of Hebrews in the First Nations version over the next few weeks. And that is Wednesdays at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. And you just go to the Facebook Good Medicine Way group again on events. You click right on that, and it has the Women's Circle. And in a few weeks, we will be starting the Lost History of Christianity, which talks about how Christianity entered Asia, the Middle East, and Africa long ago, and the pretty significantly different way it went to those countries compared to ours. So I'm really looking forward to that. And if anyone else has any announcements, raise your hand or
Shout them out.
yeah. Anyone on YouTube can post it.
Oh, look. It's
Oh my
Pastor
goodness, is
Casey
that a
Church.
Casey? Are you in the airport?
Individual.
Hey everyone,
coaching
just wanted to make note that next week Jonathan Miracle and there will be a Virginia family camp happening next weekend. So he's got like 2 days off and then he'll be hitting it again. And then Laura and I will be heading up to Red Deer up in Alberta, Canada at the last weekend of August for a family camp there. So many family camps happening. I'm hoping that someday we can have a family camp in the Southwest. So something to pray about. We're doing fine. We're sitting here in the airport waiting for our next flight to get home. Love you guys. You're doing a great job. So I'll let you go.
All right, great to see you, Casey. Looking forward to hearing the report from your perspective. We got to hear Andrew's perspective on the family camp, but yeah, it'd be nice to hear your perspective too. So
Hi, Laura.
can't wait. All right. Any other announcement?
Okay, well, shall I introduce our
Yes.
speaker for tonight? Well, tonight's speaker, Charles Brower, is from the center of Alaska. He's Inupiaq, one of my favorite tribes to say. I love how that sounds, Inupiaq. And so he's also a friend of our good friend, Carol Lakota Easton. She recommended him to us. And he has created a 12-step program that is contextual and sensitive, culturally sensitive to the First Nations people there in Alaska. So without further ado, take it away, Charles.
Oh,
I'd like to share my screen with a little bit of what we've got going, so I can share on a PowerPoint what we've got going with it. So they've allowed me to share.
yeah, you should be able to do it now.
Let me see, how do I get to this? Just a point here. Just a minute. Okay. Well, this is about Intergenerational Arctic Ministries. It's a program started a number of years ago, primarily for the villages of North Slope Borough and also St. Lawrence Island. It's a faith-based ecumenical multi-year program addressing some of the intergenerational traumas from social ills. Those social ills comes from boarding schools, comes from works of the missionaries in the early years, and even today of some of the effects of drugs and alcohol and other unsavory things that happen to us and still happen to us. So we're trying a faith-based ecumenical program to solve or at least address some of those issues and seek ways of finding some of those issues that we can fix. But our core values are about healing. They're about self-determination. They're about healthy relationships and partnering together to build whole healthy communities, but most of all, basing them on indigenous values that we have put together along with the school district and the North Slope Borough. What do? We promote community healing. It's not just for individuals. Individuals are part of it, but it's about healing communities and to make sure that nobody hurts alone. That we have people who have trained using the Stevens Way ministry model on how to take care of people in their communities, to make sure that we have caregivers there in the community that can listen to whoever might be having problems. And it starts with listening. We listen to anybody and everywhere. We even take notes on what's happening to people that they talk about on Facebook or on social media. Every individual who has a problem, who has the courage to talk about it, will be heard. And in the communities will be heard. We want to develop healthy communities. We wish to promote self-determination. We're looking for seeking sustainability. We want to engage everybody, and we want to listen and apply our cultural values. We listen, we collect data, we report on that data, and apply those cultural values in supporting and healing one another. Some of the programs we have quarterly meetings in each community where we have bring prayer ministries into the community to support healing and renewal within our communities. And we're also applying a 12-step program, and it's culturally relevant. We have been training our cohorts on that apply that 12-step program in the communities. We have a women's cohort, we have a men's cohort, and we have a youth cohort. And communities are hearing from the reports of what's happening in their communities. So we have these community steering committees where we meet together to discuss what is happening in each community strictly for that community. And how do we go about looking for resources to solve the problems, and to apply for grants to whom and who should be the administrator. And this is our organization. The board of directors is all the indigenous people, a number of
Hopefully he'll revamp here in a second. See. All right, so hopefully he'll connect back in here.
Should we ask?
Do you have his phone number or something?
Yeah.
Make sure he knows he lost connection. That was cool to start with. I'm always really encouraged when people talk about doing programs like that and they put a big emphasis on community involvement and having people in the community involved in the direction that you take it, stuff like that.
Yeah, get everyone to help say what the strengths and weaknesses are, what they feel like they need.
Yeah, how it's impacting them.
I really appreciated the part about the community steering committees too, so that it's not like this huge lump sum trying to handle everything, but specifically, going to the individual communities so you can get to those roots, and the weeds of where it starts and more interpersonal. That sounds really awesome.
Yeah.
Then there's that, I've definitely heard Indigenous people talk about how they feel like there's this whole paternalistic thing of you natives can't possibly know what's good for you, so we just need to come in and construct the whole program for you without getting your opinion at all. So glad to see that is not the norm anymore. Well, in some cases, so that's good.
Yeah, agreed, because I have sensed that before, and it instantly builds a resentment, which doesn't have to be there. I mean, it don't need any more hindrances than are already there. So it's exciting hearing Dr. Brower, right, talk, because it's really sounds like they have the tip of the arrow going right towards the
Texted him, but he has not replied yet. Well, we could lost internet. Okay.
Oh, he lost his here.
He lost his internet, but
Okay, so yeah.
Well, hey guys. Hey, if we're having this until he comes back on, I can give a little report about family camp.
Sure, yeah.
Perfect.
Let's
Good
hear
idea.
your perspective on family camp while we're waiting for him to get back.
All right. Yes, everything started off really, really well. Our first showing up, we got our van. Everybody showed up almost at the same time. Shondine came in on a different flight. Christine came in, but we picked her up on the way down there off the road at a Burger King, and we picked up Jonathan at the airport. Laura and I were at the airport, coming in on different flights. I came in from San Diego. She came in from Albuquerque. So the Lord worked it all out. We got us a big black van. We kind of looked like a government contractors or something riding around, big old black van. But we drove down to camp, picked up Christina alongside the road, and we almost forgot to Jonathan, because he was resting in one of the long back seats, and then nobody knew that he got out to go inside the restaurant, and Laura got in the car seat and got ready to drive away, and everybody's like, whoa, we're not all here yet. So that was the first part of fun starting. And then we showed up to camp. We got there. We usually make our grand entry at dinner time. So we walk in, and only half of the number were there this time. So it was about 100, just over 100 people. So that was a pretty good number, considering that it was, after COVID here, COVID settled down a bit. But we have had upwards of 250 people. So we got a long climb to get back to where we were before. So camp started off with a dinner. Then we went into our session. We had some great drum songs, sitting around and singing. It was all good to get back together. And one reason that we have some good drum sessions is that Jonathan had started using the drum, which we call, from Richard Twist named us, where the chips are down singers. The name comes from Richard because a phrase that he said. He says, when the chips are down, the buffalo's empty. And so just kind of stuck with us. So we're called the Chips Are Down Singers. And it's a group of guys, basically anybody that knows the songs that sit around the drum. And so we were an official drum group at the powwow. And we had 5 drums at the powwow. So we practiced and practiced during those times. The sessions went great that first evening. A lot of visiting, a lot of fellowship, a lot of getting to know people. Like Andrew started to, he came in kind of hesitant, but Shondine didn't let that happen. She got in, she told him, break out of your shell, man. This is the time to do it. And I think what Andrew come to see, and you heard from him, is that the family camp is a safe place, just like Good Medicine Way is a safe place to talk about these things, to be with people who are on the same journey, sometimes finding your ethnic identity in that journey, and sometimes learning to live out your faith and from your Indigenous perspective, and being around people that are all doing it. Great teachers that we had that were able to share. Drum teaching. Jonathan took a time to do a session on Friday afternoon on Indigenous Songwriting, on how he comes and puts songs together and makes them, and sometimes comes from his dreams and different ways that he says when you have a dream that you got to write it down right away. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. And sometimes that's some of the best songs that come out. We set up a trader's table, and there were several in there, about 6 trader tables. Everyone did it really well. So we were able to make good funds to cover some of our expenses, and that we had. Most of the expenses that we were able to cover is the things that we bought. So that's always fun to go to the other vendors. When Powwow Day came along, it was a great time. We start off with breakfast, and then we go into our sessions with singing and praising and worshiping, and then we lead into the lunchtime. Lunchtime leads into everyone getting ready for powwow. We're pretty good at that, setting up the powwow now. We got 17 years of experience doing that. We had very good attendance. I estimate that we probably had over 250 people at one time, but a lot of people came and went, so there might have been over 300 that kind of were there for the powwow. One of the sessions that we had was I know you can hear a speaker in the background there now. They're announcing a flight, so we'll give it a second here.
So the computer is just taking over the spine out of my hands again, and they're going to separate you into zones.
Sorry.
Things work that way. So this next group, please don't try to sit in the front of the line because that's not true.
So if you can hear me, our good friend who has been with us a few times, Barry Belindo, was our Friday night speaker. And he shared his full story of his journey of going to jail and then going to prison, his life in prison, how he came to faith, and how he lived his faith after, and how he headed up and God came to him. He ended up going to Bible college, and now, as we know him now, he attends our service once in a while. And this is his first visit to the Wachoni family camp. He's going to be a good pastor because he preached really, really long. So he's got a good story to tell. It was very powerful. A lot of things that I never knew about him came out, and it was touched a lot of folks too. So his nickname, we come to find out, his nickname is Killer. So when you see him, you can say, I heard your name was Killer, but he got that kind of from his story. I think you should let him tell it. But it was very good story. Every morning, I was able to start with a group of sometimes 8 to 10 people. for a sunrise ceremony. And each time we did a devotional during that time that went along with the theme of the camp. I also took time to help them learn about smudging and learning about making tobacco ties, the importance of tobacco ties. And a lot of young folks and a lot of older folks too really learned a lot from those sessions. One of the better things that happened is the powwow. A lot of dancing took place. Our I call him my son, Ian Twist, who was head dancer for us this time. And he did a special. I was asked to be a judge for his special because he did a men's traditional special and really went well. We gave the guys a couple of songs. They danced real hard, but as you know, you probably heard that it was over 100 degrees out, and that made things really, really tough on us. Everybody, I think, except for a few, went through all of the clothing that they bought because we sweat so much. And I know a couple of ladies, they said I was about 2 outfits short of making it through camp. So the hot weather really was a struggle for us to work, and we did manage because there were 2 rooms that had very good air conditioning. So we made our way into those rooms, and that way the sessions and the worship time really went well. So I don't know, is our friend going to come back on, you know?
He's back on. So yeah, thanks for the update on your perspective on the family camp, Casey. And we got Charles back online now. So
Okay, we'll turn it over to him again. Okay.
Yeah, we get this program back on here. Okay, I think I was in the 12-step program. We have a cohort for the women, we have a cohort for the men, and we're in the process now of training a cohort for the youth. The reason we're concentrating on the youth during the pandemic, many of our youth were online for many hours a day without parental supervision, and turns out some of them were spending hours looking at pornography on the internet, and several of them developed a kind of an addiction to porn. So we're having a youth cohort talking about what addictions are, how it happens, and how we might be able to help those youth. And cost of internet are very expensive in rural Alaska. Several families during the pandemic were realizing $2,000 and $3,000 a month internet costs, driven by these both a need for the school attendance via Zoom or whatever where they were doing it, and also by the youth who were spending hours internet surfing. But our steering committee for each community is surrounded by everybody and anybody who is in these kinds of organizations. And the listener is the key person for us in the very middle. They take note of what each community is experiencing, what people are experiencing, and we write them down in the report. And the community, we have a community, what do we call an ecosystem, a healthy mix. We have the public sector shareholders, people like the North Slope Borough, the city governments, the quasi governments like the Inuit community of the Arctic Slope, not-for-profits, schools, Arctic Slope Native Association, which is in the North Slope Borough, is the health community, the federal agencies, if they happen to be in the area, and people from the state of Alaska, the private sector shareholders, like the village corporations, the Arctic Slope Regional Corporation, businesses in the community, small businesses, and other private individuals. And the community shareholders of the tribal IRAs, the Indian Reorganization Act, the whaling crews, whatever churches are in that community, whatever organizations are there for the elders, and other village-specific organizations like drummers, drum groups. And in the middle of all that is the listeners who take note of what's happening in their communities. And these are some of the reports that we're generating. This one happens to be on the knowledge of our language. The least a number of people are kind of in the middle of whether they know our languages. We would like for these people in the number 1 to move towards number 5 eventually, number 5 being those very fluent in our languages, and less fluent are the ones down in the number 1 region. Then we have the love and respect for our elders. Again, it seems to be, in this case, in this particular village, it seems to be somewhat strong, but we would prefer that all these other numbers that are there that don't manifest themselves as respecting our elders to move up to where they would become number 5s. And spirituality. We know the power of prayer. We are a spiritual people. Again, there's quite a difference. A number of people we are identified as being very spiritual, go to church every Sunday, and participate in the village community. As far as church, things that are happening in the community that require their presence, potlatches, potlucks, whatever. But there are some who do not participate. And we would like to include those folks and encourage them to move on up to where they're doing better. Respect for nature. The Creator gave us gifts of our surroundings. Those before us place ultimate importance on respecting this magnificent gift. Again, there's a good measure up on the number 4. 4 of those people in that particular reporting period showed pretty good respect for nature. And most everybody seems to be pretty good shape, but there are some things we need to do to address those changes that we need to make. And sharing. Not many people are sharing well. We would like for those folks to do better, to share what they have with others who need their help, whether it be people who may be not so well off, people who are needing more food, clothing. We would like for the people who are down in the left-hand side of the chart kind of move their way and help those others who may need their help. Hunting traditions, reverence for the land, the sea, and the animals. It's the foundation for our hunting traditions. Again, our cash economy is to the point where many of our folks are not well versed in the hunting tradition. They may not be able to go. They may not be able to go out and hunt because of the time they have to spend in their jobs. So we're hoping that they would move on and learn a bit more about hunting, the traditions that go with it, how to read the weather, to hunt, know where the animals are headed, how to where to shoot the animals, how to keep the seals from sinking, where to shoot them properly, how to harvest them, and how to butcher them properly. So those are the kinds of things that we're doing within this Intergenerational Arctic Ministries. And like I say, it's our local government put great emphasis on in solving a lot of the social ills that are happening in our communities. And after spending quite a bit of money on different programs through the schools and through drug and alcohol treatment programs, sending people out, they realized we need to do more locally. So they're asked the faith community to gather together. It's an ecumenical work, every church in every community in our region are part of our Intergenerational Arctic Ministries, and they all support on what we're doing, how we're doing it, and they are very willing to make it happen. So thank you very much. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so does anybody have any questions at all that you can think of? It was a very good presentation for sure, and it was very informative, and it was talking on a lot of different subjects, and I know it's quite a lot to take in all at once, but I thought this was a very important work that he's talking about. And does anybody have any questions at all?
I have a question. Had the same mind. Yeah, I just had a question. I'm going to be doing psychology in the fall, and I want to focus on trauma recovery therapy and substance abuse, and work a lot with our Indigenous people, but and kind of come from that traditional lens and kind of come from that perspective. But kind of what I really got a lot from was the community approach versus the individualist approach, which is very common in the West. What key ways, like universal ways, do you see of applying that in different communities that are maybe more oriented towards, like, just what, I guess, to refine my question, in what ways could you make it more communal, like psychology, for example? How could you make that more communal versus individualistic with your with what you're talking about?
The 12-step program we're working with is the people are connected to, and they're licensed psychologists, psychiatrists, or psychiatric people, psychology support people. They're licensed in their professions. They're mental health people, and they work through something called what is it? Individual families, IFS, individual family systems, I think it is. But the people we're dealing with have been running programs for a number of years around the world with other Indigenous folks. There's some programs over in Afghanistan, some programs, and they're working with Pine Ridge Reservation. They're working with Wolf Point and the youth in that area. So they do have some tribal support, and they're working with us on training our cohorts who lead the 12-step programs. And how do we do it? But how do we apply our cultural values to each of the steps that they have? And we're working very closely with the mental health people in the North Slope Borough and the Native Association that runs the hospital there.
So,
Yes, thank you.
Brother Brower, it's called Internal Family Systems, IFS. Does that ring a bell?
Yes, internal family, that's it, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Oops, sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay.
Donna has her hand up too, so I don't want to take a long time. I'm just curious about how long your program has been going on. I don't remember hearing that.
Well, we started about 4 years ago, but we were set back by COVID for a while, for a couple of years. But that gave us time to breathe and look at what resources are we lacking there that we need to emphasize. And that also put us on a timeline that we are recovering nicely now, but it gave us time to really look at the basics of what we need to do, the types of people we need to engage, how do we improve our reporting process, the biggest part being, how do we engage the community as a whole through their steering committees? And once they see how their involvement in steering committees can address those issues in each community, they become much more involved. And we're even addressing issues that are different. There's one community that says that they're spending a lot money fixing cars after their road become potholes. And so we're dealing with the local government, the North Slope Borough and the native village of that community, into having the road graders out more often. And then there's one church, one community that they have a little dribblers basketball program, but the kids were having a hard time trying to figure out who is on which team when they're in the heat of the passion of the moment of what do we do. But one of the mothers brought that up as an issue for her community, and so we applied for a grant from the Arctic Slope Community Foundation, which is not for profit, providing money to issues in the community. And they gave us money, or that community, enough money to buy jerseys for all the little dribbler kids. So those kinds of, and we're working now with the Presbytery of the Yukon. Their church in one of the communities has got leaks in their roof, and their heating system is not working too well. So the Presbytery of the Yukon is working with us in trying to develop a long-term solution to some of those infrastructure problems they have. Those are the types of issues that the steering committee is very involved in. And like I say, once they hear how they can be involved, they are very involved. And it's a community effort, and it works. Seems to be working much better than it was before. But we do have some major hurdles, like issues of people not being engaged and not learning their languages too well, or participating in issues in the community. We have one community that we're dealing with now. It's about 50 years old as a new community. They restarted back in the 1960s. And they're getting to be in cliques, and they're not having regular conversations as a whole community, but the steering committee is bringing them back together. The cliques are starting to talk with one another again. And so they're able to address issues as a whole community rather than just one silo at a time. So it's very hopeful for us. It looks good so far.
So, Dr. Barrow, you basically just kind of answered my question. Just a little bit more to that. When you've encountered resistance to the community steering committees, what are your suggestions? I mean, sometimes there's so much hurt there that there is a lot of resistance to receiving any, from, like outside programs and stuff like that. What are your suggestions for like on the smaller reservations here, where there's a big wedge between outer community and the tribal community, of just kind of finding a way to get that started, a wedge, just your foot in the door with the idea of community steering committees, through starting at the church level maybe, or because like you said, some people were quick to interact and some people didn't. And it's kind of like when I've been involved in ministry before, it's at the very basic level. You either don't have enough that are willing to pull and go at it together, or you just there's just not enough of you to stay with it, and you get tired out and finally give up.
I think the thing that gives the steering committee more power to work together, and the community as a whole, are the reports our listeners put together. They list what the problems they're hearing, whether it be an individual needing prayers, whether it be an elder who can't quite read what our prescriptions are supposed to be for, or like in one instance, the roads are bad. We put those down on paper, and we generate a report on a quarterly basis that we send to that community, and the steering committee looks at those, and they can identify there's 10 people say they have problems with this particular medical provider, there 10 people do this or whatever, so they can quantify the issues that they're hearing on a report, and they have something concrete that they can look at and say, these are issues that our people are addressing for us. So having a database with reports has been very helpful in the sense of who do we talk to, how do we talk about it, and who can help us. That's the biggest part. Who can help us? Finding that out. And we've got resources across the state that we can everything from the Yukon Presbytery to the Community Foundation to the state of Alaska in some instances. So having a good database with good reports is very important for us. It's not just hearsay.
That's what I was going to say. Thank you, sir. That's what we've always depended on so much. I appreciate that clarification. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew was next with his hand up.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Dr. Brower, for sharing that. My question relates more around the 12 steps. So I've been in recovery for at least maybe 16 years now or so, and I've been in many recovery groups, and they are all very good, and they are all effective at helping someone achieve sobriety. And I found I've been able to stay sober, but several years back, and especially when I wanted to reclaim my tribal identity and follow in the ways my ancestors were calling me, I just didn't fit anymore, because it's about recovery from alcohol or drugs or whatever. And it's a very Western approach, and those values you talked about, there are values there, but they are different than the native values. So do you have people up there that have maybe tried AA or tried some other programs and they've walked away because they just don't fit, or maybe it's just not helping them? And if so, how do you encounter people like that maybe don't want to give it a chance because, oh, I tried AA and whatever? Is that something that comes up in your community? And if so, then how do you address it?
The leaders we have in our 12-step program are people who have gone through the 12-step or the Alcoholics Anonymous programs themselves. We require that they have experience in those systems, and we make sure that they're part of a church, that they are really involved in church before we train them as to be the cohort. We call the cohorts for the men and for the women. And then when we talk about our 12 steps, we look for some of our cultural values that fit into each step. And then we have Bible verses that relate to that particular cultural value. Like, for instance, in compassion, we look at 1 Kings 8, verses 50 and 51. And forgive your people who have sinned against you. Forgive all offenses they have committed against you, and cause their conquerors to show them mercy. For they are your people and your inheritance, whom you brought out of Egypt, out of that iron smelting furnace. So those kinds of Bible verses, we relate to whatever step that might fit. And so, like I say, we involve those cohorts in studying the scripture. We involve them in finding places within the 12 step, and the 12 step program. Each week that we have a meeting, we have somebody who has experienced that and takes to heart that particular step, and have somebody talk to us for 20 minutes about their experiences and what they gained from it. So we do require people who have gone through the process themselves, the people who are involved with church, who see the need and are very, very committed to making it happen.
Okay, next is Kimberly. Has a Kimberly Medicine horn.
Good evening, Dr. Brower. What a fantastic program. When I was listening to you discuss the listener, I was wondering what qualifications, what do you look for the person in that position? And then, because they almost sound like a consultant, somebody who comes in with fresh eyes and can see and hear things that people who have been in the middle of it, of all the hard work, may not be able to. That's one question. And question number 2, is anyone keeping track of the elders and the teachers and what the long-term positive effects are for them doing this program? 2 questions. Thank you.
The number one, we work with particularly with the churches, primarily with the churches in each community, and ask them for recommendations on who they would recommend that we qualify as listeners. And if those folks are willing to join us, we give them 40 hours of instruction on caregiving using the Stevens ministry model. So we involve the churches in initially selecting the people, identifying those folks, and then have conversations, intense conversations about how they feel about being what we call a listener, and how they feel about being involved in caregiving in their community. And we also involve the North Slope Borough Health Department in particularly their mental health people in working with us and looking at our curriculum. And if there's anything else we need to add to the curriculum so that we can both work with the health department, the mental health people. And that's how we select our listeners. The churches and the health department are involved in our selection of who might work. And the second question was about, you have to help me with the second question. What was the second question?
The second question I was wondering, is anyone doing reports or studies on the elders, instructors, what the positive effects are that they experience doing this program?
Well, we haven't had that much experience to say that, or we haven't been running that long. We've only been running for sure, probably for about a year, but we've been in existence for 3 years, and COVID stopped us dead for a while. But the elders are very much a part of our listening circle. Several of them are elders themselves, and they give us ideas of what might work. And one of the things that they ask us to is to encourage the young folks to consider some of those respect for elder things that we used to do, like when the young person goes out, gets the first animal they ever hunt of that particular species, they give it to an elder and share the whole animal with the elder. And so that goes to number one, our respect for elders. Number two, encouraging our people to consider how we survived before the missionaries came and how first contact was made, how we survived as communities. And the elders are a great resource for that. We ask them to come and share stories, and they're very willing to do it. Some of our elders get very involved in our programs. We have several elders on our board of directors. So they get involved in all aspects of what we do.
So that was really informative. I have a question. Have you found this method to be very effective in helping the young people to break their addictions? And I was also kind of wondering, what are the ages? Like, what are the age limits, like from the youngest to the oldest who are in the programs?
Well, the youngest we're working with right now are probably about 13, 14-year-olds. Most of them, the youth are in the high school age, and they have all the different youths have so many different interests in those years. Some are in sports, some are in other things, that we have problems in trying to identify what particular youth group, what interests should we be looking at and focusing on. But the biggest thing for us are those families. Really, the families are the ones, the parents are the ones that come to us with these problems. When they say $2,000 of internet charges in a month, and you confront their youth, and the youth just walk away, go use another one of their friends' internet access when the families shut off the internet at home. So it's mostly in the teenage years, mostly in the high school age, but we do have a couple who the parents have asked us, and they're probably 10 or 11 years old. They're just pre-high school, but they're still spending a lot of hours on internet looking at TikTok or whatever. And so trying to break that cycle and trying to engage them rather than using their thumbs and social or anti-social, we call it anti-social media, to engage personally. And how do we do that? And trying to work as a family unit. And we're looking at maybe running family type culture camps where the whole family is involved rather than just the kids. So short term, 3 days for some folks, week for others. So and they're all sponsored, like I say, and supported by the different churches. It's a very ecumenical effort.
Okay, Andrew has a question now.
So I was just curious, you talked about reintroducing one of the cultural hunting practices to also integrate that into, elder respect. And I was curious because you did talk about the spiritual practices. How do you incorporate, if it's certain ceremonies or anything into that communal, healing and everything? So I was just curious about maybe some of the ceremonies.
Everything's kind of frozen for me. I didn't quite get that last question.
Oh, sure. I was curious because you had talked about bringing in traditional cultural practices with hunting and integrating that with honoring elders by bringing them the first animal, and you had also talked about bringing in some of the local spirituality. So I was curious specifically, what are some of the ceremonies or spiritual practices that are emphasized as part of this communal healing?
One of the things we have been encouraging is more study of some of the practices that were there culturally before the missionaries came and changed a number of the cultural practices we used to have. And that has caused some problems within the churches and also in some of the communities. The missionaries have done a very good job in training some of the church leaders into their way of thinking, but to try to get back to the basics of what we were doing before the missionaries came has also been identified or listed as non-Christian. For instance, there was a family of 3 that were discovered that they were killed when ice crushed their sod house, and the church folks wanted to have a Christian burial for them, but then the younger folks who were in the process of learning about our cultures pre-contact said, well, how can we have a church service for people who never heard of Jesus Christ? So a lot of conversation within the churches and in the community to try to resolve that issue of what do we do and how do we integrate and how do we think about our practices pre-contact, the impact of the church today, and how can we live together and honor both sides. And elders and the stories the elders tell are some of the ways that we can kind of bridge some of those issues. So that not only are the elders recipients of some of the food, but they're also very involved in thinking back of their memories and finding others to tell their story as well, so we can collaborate and share stories. So we're having more and more of conversations in their community, one community to another, when we hear something and we bring that story to another community and ask them, what do you hear about this? What do you think about this? And so they're able to share some of those stories and also generate greater interest in how do we interact spiritually from before contact, and how do we integrate it and do it with respect for the current churches that are there? And how can we engage those churches in making sure they're honoring our values? Because a lot of our values are very Christian, I think, in the basis and how they react. But some of the early missionaries mistook them to be pagan. And so we're having that battle of trying to work those cultural values in the non-pagan ways that the church might be more accepting of. For instance, the drumming in the community of Barrow, when somebody dies, the churches are strong enough to where they will ban all drumming and dancing for a couple of days or before, right after somebody's death. But some of the folks are asking the family that is involved with the loss of a loved one, is it okay if we honor his memory with dancing? Did he like to dance? So those values are very much in the highlight today of why churches, well, what churches saw as pagan and that are not. There were celebrations for us, celebrations of life. But in Nome, a different area from us, the local folks, when they have a funeral, they have a regular church service. They have a potluck afterwards, so with stories about that person, and they end the day with what we call an Eskimo dance, a drumming time, using our traditional songs. So it's not across the board of where each community sits on it, but in some of the larger communities, the churches are strong enough. They have stopped some of those issues, some of those cultural values that we used to share with one another. It's really a lot of conversation with the churches of what was there before and how was it that became pagan when it really wasn't. So conversing with the churches and the leadership that be, and bringing up stories of how we used to use those practices, and telling those stories together and sharing how it might help others in their daily life. What can we do to help those folks get better at thinking more positive, not only about themselves, but about their community?
Hey, Dr. Brower, one thing I'm kind of curious about is you're using a lot of kind of evidence-based theory and scientific and academic theory, and it seems like a lot of times that churches have been a little resistant to academia, and even some native communities have some issues with things from anthropology and academia because of just how things were not done in sensitive ways. So, but you're managing to bring together traditional values, faith communities, and academic knowledge all together in this program that you're doing. And I find that pretty incredible that you've been able to tap all three of those resources for the best that they have to bring. And I just wondered, was that challenging to make that happen, or did it just kind of come together, or like what's the story behind all that?
Well, I like to say that God was in the middle and he led the way. But we did a lot of research, and we're still doing a lot of research. There are some things out there that are academia, some of those researchers have gone out into some of our communities and identified how a resurgence of language might be happening and where it's happening. For instance, the dance groups, the traditional songs that they learn and use the language. And if the young folks can get involved with those dance groups, they can learn some of the language. So even that kind of a connection is important for those people who have studied it, and we can point at it and say, it's working in this community. They have a dance group, strong. In Barrow, we have a very strong connection for dances. There are probably 5 different dance groups, and several of them have young folks as part of their dance groups, and they're learning some of the languages issues that maybe not be hearing at home.
I'd like to share a little bit here, Dr. Barrow, about encourage you to continue the work that you're doing. My doctoral work was done in an alcohol treatment program in Farmington, New Mexico. Over a 10-year period, we kept track of all the records, followed them in. We took our program from 18% success rate of Native men leaving alcohol to a 75% success rate over a 10-year period. And that resource, I would like to add to this talk as a resource for anyone that's interested, that I did my doctoral research on that, and it's available on Amazon. It's titled Rites of Passage. And it does you see all of my statistics, all of my interviews, all of my approach. But also in the Holy Smoke book, I also refer to how we conducted the alcohol treatment program as far as incorporating the sweat lodge, prayer methods, singing with the drum, and talking circle. So those two resources I would like to add to your work here, and also to you if you are interested in seeing those as well. Thank you so much for joining us too for this talk, Dr. Brown.
Thank you very much. We're very much interested in programs that work, particularly if they're working on reservations or other Native American communities.
Like 2892. Does anybody have any other questions to ask the doctor? Okay, I do have one last question then. I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit more about where you come from, like in Alaska. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, if you would not mind.
Well, my family grew up in Barrow. My last name, Brower, my grandfather was a whaler that came up to Alaska back in the 1800s. My father was his oldest son. My mother was from Wainwright. It's about 90 miles down the coast from Barrow. Her parents were from Wainwright, but there was another community that used to be back up towards the mountains. What's the name of it? So I grew up in a kind of in a blended family. My grandfather spoke English. Most of my family spoke English, and I'm a product of boarding schools. I went to boarding school from 7th and 8th grade on through high school. I did not have the negative experiences many of my classmates and others had, and I'm thankful God for that. But after that, I was also on the relocation program to Los Angeles to learn electronics, basic electronics. The idea being that the government would train a number of us Native Alaskans on how to be electronic technicians, so we could come back home and maintain and repair some of the radar and early warnings programs that the government was putting in place. But when they closed the school in Los Angeles, they moved us to New York City. And I lived in a tenement in Newark on the 22nd floor, and the elevator would go out fairly regular. It was a long trek up and down those stairs, but there were shootings in the neighborhood every night. It was difficult. I lasted there about a month, and I decided this is not for me. So I applied to Haskell Institute back then, before we changed his name to University of Haskell or something. But I was going to go to Haskell, but they were full. So I ended up flying to University of Kansas in Lawrence, same town. But Vietnam got hot and heavy, and I got a draft notice. So I went and joined the Navy instead. So but I've been engineering. I got a degree in electrical engineering, a master's in business. I've been an engineer in the aerospace world for many years. Now, the president of several Alaska Native Corporation-owned companies, successful, and retired. One thing I have been, this is my third retirement. And people keep telling me, you're failing at retirement. You're back at work again. So, but that's me. I got to keep doing things that need fixing. And the way I became a pastor is that in Alaska, when the missionaries left 7,500 years ago, they left a church building and a community with some belief in God and Jesus Christ, and really no way of supporting those churches and the faith communities in each community. So I started looking at who and where they were. Today, we still have probably over 100 communities that don't have regular church service. And I gathered together as many native pastors as I could to have conversation on what can we do, what are our challenges, how can we attract young folks back into church. And so somehow or another, when it came time to start looking for pastors, there was nobody behind me. So I said, well, I guess I better go out. So that's how I got in the ministry.
That's a really great story. So you were in the Navy, you said?
Yes.
What was your experience?
I'm not
like?
at the pulpit regularly, but I managed to generate enough interest. I talked about my boarding school days and the effects of boarding school on young folks in Alaska, throughout Alaska, to a group of 3 churches in western part of Wisconsin. I've talked to a number of conferences sponsored by the United Methodist Church on congregational development, on what it is to be Native in a church where 98% of the church is the dominant culture, but they're still spending money on us, and what can we do to alleviate that pressure that they put on people of color, pastors of color, pastoring to primarily white churches. So God has put me in a different place. It gets to be a challenge occasionally, but it's something I think I'm carrying out okay. But thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions? Anything on Facebook or anything like that?
And I'm kind of mixed. But my grandchildren, some of my grandchildren, 5 of them, are mixed. Part of them right now are down in Mescalero Reservation, southern part of New Mexico, and enjoying some of the festivities of the coming of age ceremonies and whatnot are happening there. We make sure they stay connected with their family from Mescalero.
I have a question. I'm a professor with the North American Institute of Indigenous Theological Studies, and I teach culture and change there, and have been using Casey Church's books to help me with that, because we have usually been using just old dead white men, their writings on missions. And so I'm wanting to see if we can work to bring in Indigenous perspectives on bringing more of the good news to Indigenous people from Indigenous perspectives. And I'm just wondering if you know of writings besides Casey Church's that are by Indigenous people that talk about bringing the gospel to Indigenous communities, or if this is something that you just more can speak of from your own experiences.
I've been working with James LaBelle, who I've known since boarding school days, when we were both in the preteen years, and he is on the board of directors of the Indigenous boarding school situation across the United States. And so through that, he and I, before that started, we were both involved in working with communities throughout Alaska, Indigenous people, particularly the children and grandchildren of those folks who went through boarding school, and working with them in identifying some of the social ills that we suffer because of our boarding school days, the impacts on alcoholism, drugs, on other issues like that, mainly because we didn't have good role models, parenting role models that we still lack today.
Mhm.
And we see that in several generations down. And so Jim and I and several others in ministry, Anna Frank from the Episcopal Church in Fairbanks, a native Episcopal priest. We go and have conversations, invitations to some of those communities, and talking about what are the impacts and what caused some of the issues that we're having in communities and multi-generational, the trauma that we've had and where it comes from, to try to bring issues to the forefront so the younger folks, the children and the grandchildren, can understand why their parents don't want to talk about certain issues, and have them understand that there are some deep hurts there. And how can we get past that? So it's going to be generations before it probably proves out fruit. But until those folks understand where their parents and grandparents are coming from, that trauma is going to be there for a long time.
True. Yeah, it takes time to heal deep intergenerational trauma.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe for you to think about is, I think I'll be teaching June of this coming year. It's an intensive class in the summer, and we need to have elders actually talking at our classes. And I wonder if you might consider doing a Zoom talk with us. Just something to think and pray about, unless you're like, yes, I'd like to already, but if that's not too much of a burden.
For the generational trauma stuff, I would work with James LaBelle. He's here in Alaska, and he's very open to having conversation. In fact, the Methodist Church a number of years ago, he came and spoke to a family camp about generational traumas from the missionaries and boarding schools. That happened in Oklahoma. That's been a number of years ago. So he's willing to. He and his wife are both very involved in generational trauma from boarding schools and missionaries.
Right. How do you spell his last name?
Labelle.
Labelle. Okay.
Yeah. James LaBelle.
And he's with the Methodist?
No, he doesn't go to church. Some of the issues that happened to him during boarding school days are things that drove him away from. He's spiritual, but he's not associated with any church.
Okay, so
you can find him on Facebook as well.
Okay, Facebook. So then also, I would be interested in just having people talking about the work with the churches too, and the inner. It might not be churches; it might be still people showing the love of Jesus, and how you see that playing out. So that would also be helpful for my students.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you would be interested in talking about that for a few minutes, that could be helpful too.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then you also mentioned Anna Franks. Could she be another helpful person?
She was early on, back in Alaska when children were being taken from families to send to boarding schools. Her grandparents hid her, so she spent this. She did not go to boarding school, mainly because her grandparents hid her, but she became later on an Episcopal priest here in Alaska, and she has led several boarding school survivors back to the location where the boarding school used to be to start their healing process.
Mm. Wow.
She's a native Athabascan woman from the old town of Minto.
Wow. Well, I shouldn't take up more time, but thank you so much.
Yes, you're welcome.
Jolene, I'd like to add to what in September, there'll be a Methodist conference that I can give you information on that I will be attending. It's going to be on intergenerational trauma and how to care for pastors. Yeah. So that's coming up. I'll get you that information. That's something that I will be attending.
Okay.
I believe it's in Illinois.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you. you. I'd like to get that information.
That the one on September 19th or the 20 something?
Yes, I'll be at that one. I'll be doing a workshop.
Yeah. I'm going to be in that workshop on nonviolent communication during that session, I think. But the
Oh, great.
Methodists-
It'll be great. Look
Yeah.
forward to seeing you there.
Yes.
All right.
But the Methodists have, we have a, what we call Native American course of study for people who are learning how to be pastors and using the traditional ways of Native peoples, working as a community rather than as individuals to learn about the Bible and ways of doing ministry.
Well, that's. Yes, that's what I'm one of the instructors of that program.
Okay, sounds good. We'll be looking forward to seeing you there.
Okay, take care now.
Right.
All right, 1 second, man. 1 second, man. 1 second. Let me do.
And you said that there was a program that you work with about teaching Indigenous people how to be pastors or something you just said?
Yes, the Native American course of study it's been around for a number of years now. I'm a graduate of that program where we take lay people in the Methodist Church, and twice a year we have meetings at some locations. Some have happened on reservations, some have happened at churches, but it's a group of people who minister primarily to Indigenous people. Some on reservations. There are some white people there that preach at Native churches that are part of the curriculum or part of the group, and we've had several graduates of that school who have gone on to doing very well. So we gather once in a while, and this the event in September happens to be one of those where the graduates of that program are now coming back together to have conversations about nonviolent communications. How do we engage in nonviolent communications and issues that the Methodist Church has with accepting people of color and ministry and when they assign them to churches that are primarily non-color, how do we support them? And we also have within the Methodist Church a Native American International Caucus where we address issues of social justice and education. And it's all people of color. Most of us are Indigenous people from different tribes.
Can you say that again, please, so I can make a note of it?
Yeah, the group is called the Native American International Caucus within United Methodist Church. And Raggy Callentine is our current chair. She's Lenny Lapi from somewhere in Delaware.
Okay. And so if I looked at, or any of us look up that Native American International Caucus within United Methodist Church, we'll be able to get more information about this material programs. Okay, great. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave.
Well, Pastor, I will fill in some of our folks here too, and the rest of the Methodist things that are out there. I'm just like a Methodist, so and working with the Methodist on a church plant right now. So I will fill in Jolene and others that have information, want information, and especially for the conference in September. So
Okay.
I'll fill them in. Okay.
All right. Looking
Take care
forward
now.
to it. Yes.
I gotta go.
Thanks.
boarding a plane right now.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any other questions at all? Anything to ask Mr. Dr. Brower?
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Ah, wonderful.
We will do our closing song here. It's our normal round dance that we close with. So yeah, feel free to get up and round dance where you're at.
All right, that was some good singing, some good dancing. I saw Andrew getting down. Well, I guess this would conclude it. I'd like to say a little send-off prayer to everybody. So here we go. Heavenly Father, Maheo, Sankashila, Creator. Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you for this evening, and I want to thank you for all those who gathered to listen to or listen about this wonderful program that Pastor Brower told us about. It was really touching to hear that there is a way to live as within the church as yourself, and to still be able to hold on to those things of the past and bring them into the present and to build a better future. And Heavenly Father, I just lift everyone up who is within listening or who is listening or viewing this right now. And I just pray that you help shine a light to them and help guide them out of whatever dark situations they may be in, and know that there's a way that you can balance the way of life that you've created for each of us. I pray that each of us also take a moment to listen to where Creator is leading us, where the Holy Spirit is leading us, where you want us to go, and your will be done, Lord. I just pray that you help give us the hearts and give us the surrender that we need to follow in the way that you want us to be. I also pray that everyone who is traveling right now, everyone who is out here in the hot heat, I just pray that you guide them safely wherever they're going, Lord, and let their homes still be the same way that they left them, but better. I just want to thank you for bringing all of us together again, and I just pray that you bless each one of us and continue to pull out our heartstrings. And Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you personally. Just thank you for all the many blessings that you've given me and that you've given to this ministry here. And I pray that you continue to help this place grow. It's a very good place to be, Lord. And I want to thank you for all the visions and all the ideas that came to bring this to pass. And Heavenly Father, I just pray that you just continue to guide us. I ask all these things in your Son Jesus' name. Amen. All right.
Woohoo!
All right.
Thank
you so much,
Charles.
everybody. And who do we got next week?
Kelsey. Oh, it is the day before Mark Charles. I believe it's Michelle Nievidomie. Let me look right here on the calendar. Let's get this for sure.
Yes, we have Mark Charles on Tuesday.
On the 8th is Michelle Nievidomie. She was a speaker this year at Nate's. You might have seen her there. She might have been one of your students, Kim or Julene. Michelle Nievidomie, I think I'm saying her name right. She was talking about the grandmas of the Cree Nation up there. Kookums, maybe? And yeah, so she's going to speak on the 8th, on Monday night next week. And then on Tuesday night is Mark Charles. So it's a 2-for-1 deal that week. Woohoo!
All right. We'll see you all next week for a double dose of Good Medicine Way. Thank you so much for coming.
Monday.
Back to show them all the
Back
things
to back.
where the microwave is.
Yeah, so Lana and Preston?
Lana and Preston, yeah.
Okay.
This is
So
my
there's